I tell people all the time, wait patiently while preparing profusely. So in those moments, you have to prepare profusely because you're going to get an opportunity to come back and do it again. Whether it was quitting before my time as a motivational speaker, as an athlete, there's always a magical moment that happens in the quitting point that I also write about in the book. And fourth and foremost is that you have to run towards the roar.
This is the Own It Show, where we tell stories of how everyday people made ownership theirs.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Own It Show. I'm your host, Justin Rothling-Schofer. Same background, same chair, same microphone, same place, but different topic. And if you're new here, I really encourage you, go take a look back. We've had about 297 different episodes thus far. And so whether you're going from LA to New York or New York to Paris, there's going to be a whole bunch of great information, great nuggets for you to really take in and help you live a life of ownership, because we know that success is different. So we have to think different, look different, and feel different in order to optimize that. And what does ownership do? Ownership gets us there. It's that bridge. And so if you're new to this podcast and you hear something today, I want you to subscribe. I want you to share it with somebody so that they can ultimately receive that blessing into their life too, because this is how we reach people. And this is how we truly create the life change that you've already had the fortune of realizing. And so today I could not be more excited. I met this man through a former Own It Show member, John Gordon. And as the more that I've gotten to know our guest today, he's just one of those people that gets it. He's one of those people that lives a life of ownership. He's experienced so much in his life, but yet he's also been able to steward the gifts that he's been given in a really powerful way. He has a heart to give. He has a heart to show up for people. He has a heart to bring people through their trials, their tribulations, and help bring out their greatness, which is what a true born leader does. And so today we're really going to dive into the concepts of what does it look like to be able to lead yourself? What does it look like to be able to dive deep and dig into your own heart and bring out that greatness within you? And so I'm super pumped and excited. Thomas Williams, it is a pleasure to have you on. Former professional athlete and now current professional speaker. It is it's awesome to have you on the show.
And appreciate it, Justin. It's great, man, getting connected with you through our devotional chats and now being able to connect with you, audio, verbally. It's just an honor, man. And I love the name Own It. And so I'm going to go today from I get it, but I want to own it. So that's what we're getting ready to do, man. Good to see you, brother.
I love it. It's great to see you too. I'd love for you to kind of just share with our audience a little bit here, kind of diving into this journey that you've been on, because ultimately played 5 years in the NFL. Theoretically, everybody's dream, a lot of people's dream to be a professional athlete and hold that honor, feel what it feels like to get drafted on draft day, be able to step on, throw a jersey on, go to training camp, get into that space, and now play on Sundays. Like, what was that journey like for Thomas Williams that ultimately shaped Thomas Williams into Thomas Williams?
Yeah, man, I love it. A couple of years ago, you couldn't have asked me this question because it was so painful to go back and revisit, to relive. Football was my everything, but it wasn't the Sundays or the Saturdays in college or even the Friday nights in high school. What it was a child who just avidly needed a father. And so for me, football represented my dad, who my dad and I have a great relationship right now. But we didn't have a great relationship growing up. My parents got divorced early on. I was witness of domestic violence from an early age. And so for me, rage, anger, curiosity, as well as physical contact was almost like ingrained in me. And so I was the kid on the playground in elementary school when it was recess. I love recess, but I was the kid who threw the ball at people's head when we played kickball. I took two-hand touch football and to tackle football because I was just wanting to be aggressive. And so for me, when I found the game of football in high school, I was like, wait a minute, we get rewarded to be physical. We get applauded to like run into people and throw them on the ground. Oh, sign me up. And so I found the game of football, which I love. But again, I think football for me represented so much more. I mean, I'm an only child. And I tell people all the time, I'm my mom's favorite. She did it once so good, she didn't need to do it again. And then having the mindset of you have this brotherhood in this locker room, or you have this brotherhood in the huddle. And then you have a coach who to me was almost like a father figure. And that coach would tell us, good job. Hey, you need to do more. So they would discipline us. They would teach us commitment, sacrificing, enduring. And so I just loved it. I mean, I was the kid in high school, college, and in the NFL that I loved to go to practice because I was around my brothers. And then I was around a father figure. So it was like that family void that wasn't getting, away from school, at home on the weekends. And I was actually getting it there for those 2 hours at practice or playing the game. And so I was lucky enough and committed and willing enough to earn a scholarship, playing at USC, 2 national championships. I get drafted, played in the NFL for 5 years, and ultimately suffered a career-ending neck injury. And so that was that phase and chapter of my life that came to a close abruptly, but it came purposefully.
Wow. There's so much to unpack here. Like I take little notes, and I've got like 5 things bolded. And so I want to go back a little bit to one of the first things that you said was, and this is what I heard and kind of my interpretation of this, but football basically became your identity. It became what you were. Thomas Williams wasn't Thomas Williams, the man. He was football. And talk us through a little bit about what that injury did to you to your identity and to your self-worth and to your overall health, not just physically having a neck injury, but to the mental, emotional, spiritual side of Thomas Williams when that was all of a sudden taken away, because it just wasn't your identity, but it was also your father figure. It was your family. It all of a sudden became everything. And in one injury, now everything is gone, your identity, your family, and all of these other things. So talk us through that a little bit.
Yeah. So, the game of football is tied so closely to life because you wear a helmet with a face mask. And so people never see you. You don't show up as yourself. You show up as this number, as this position, as this gladiator, as this beast. And so when you take off your helmet for the last time, you now have to go into the world as yourself. And you never went into the game, which you had the most confidence. You had almost sometimes the most pride and arrogance. You never got an opportunity to be who you were in that setting. And so now you're stripped of all of those things, which gives you the confidence, and you walk into an environment where you have to be who you are. I remember when I would introduce myself when I got done playing, and whether it was somebody who knew me from my playing days in the NFL or in college, they would say, "What are you up to now?" And I would have to tell them, "I'm Thomas Williams, the former." So I would speak almost as I am today, but in a past tense. And I didn't have anything else to tie myself to. And I wasn't comfortable enough to tell people that I'm Thomas Williams, and I'm now figuring it out at 27 years old. What do I want to do next? Or what do I want to do with the rest of my life? I would always fill it quickly with, yeah, but I won 2 national championships and I got drafted and this is where I played. I didn't have that confidence to say, hey, without the face mask, without the helmet, without the shoulder pads, this is who I am. And I'll tell you, Justin, it was funny because one of the first things that I did when I noticed that I had that void and I needed to fill it spiritually is I went to church. And so in LA, I used to go to Shepherd of the Hills where Pastor Dudley would greet us each Sunday. And this day I walked in and I was completely stripped. I was naked, but I wasn't willing to tell the world, but I was okay with telling God. And so I walk into the church doors and I hear this amazing, beautiful song, or my chains are gone and now I'm free. Like even saying that to you right now, it makes me chill up because my chains are gone and now I'm free. Like, wait a minute, I just came out of something that I thought I lost, but you mean that losing it actually gives me something? Freedom? What? So I'm sitting in church and Pastor Dudley, I couldn't even tell you the message that day, but I remember just in constant communication and connection with God this whole entire time. God, just give me a sign. Give me a sign that I didn't make a mistake, that I'm not supposed to go back. I'm not supposed to rehab, and that's supposed to be my purpose. And God immediately said, you thought football was your purpose, but it was just your passion to lead you to your purpose, which means now I have a future, right? And so it almost goes back to Jeremiah 29:11. Like, I know the plans that I have for you. So wait a minute, this was ordained. This was an accident. This was on purpose to get me to this next stage and chapter. Now, it wasn't just like overnight. I now all of a sudden go, okay, great. I have this new game, this new team. I still had a lot of work that I needed to do, a lot of voids that needed to be filled. But at least I have direction now. I went to therapy for those 5 years. And in the first year, I went to therapy twice a week so that I could get a grip and a grasp of who I was as a person. awaken the inner me so that I could have self-awareness, so that I could understand that I'm not the little 8-year-old boy, 5-year-old boy, 3-year-old boy that was still hurt. I'm the 27-year-old man. Like, I remember my therapist waking me up to that. And Doug Friedman, who is a phenomenal therapist out in Los Angeles, gave me that gift that I could be vulnerable and tough. One of the hardest questions I had to answer, Justin, was I a fraud? I asked myself the question all the time. And I'd say, Doug, am I a fraud? He goes, what do you mean? I said, was I a tough guy pretending to be nice? Or was I a nice guy pretending to be tough? And that complexity for me to try to figure that out all of the time I was a walking complexity. And so I was trying to figure out. And one day he said, Thomas, stop trying to figure out that question because you're both. And that's where he gave me the gift of understanding both of the identities that I used to have as an athlete, or both the identities that an athlete still has. You're both. You're the person in your sport, in the jersey, and you're the person outside of the sport. And so now what's up to me to figure out, how can I mesh those two worlds together? And that's what brought me to public speaking, consulting, advising, facilitating. And so I'm still both. I tell people all the time, I never stopped playing football. I just don't tackle people anymore.
Publicly.
There you go. There you go. There you go.
That.
You know it.
I love that. It's so powerful what you're saying. And like that story, like I bring myself into that room and into that church, and I can see it because I felt it. I'm sure everybody in some way, shape, or form has felt like the chains literally melting off of them if they have that relationship with Jesus, if they've come into that and have been able to experience that. But I think there's also something that this kind of brings me back to, and it's this concept of healing, where we talk often about health, right? And being like, what does true health mean? And the definition of heal and the definition of integrated, they're the exact same. It means to bring together, become one, and find that. And your story brings me back to this acronym for heal that I have. It's honesty, engage, allow, and love. And so you're being honest with yourself. You were being honest with this person that forever was like, no, this is what I am. This is who I am. This is, you go back to this. I was drafted here. I won 2 national championships. I've played for this team and this is like where I am. But no, you haven't been honest with that little boy inside that needed to like come out, and you needed to engage with him. You needed to allow him to be there. You needed to love that man, that young little boy, so that he could ultimately come out in that 27-year-old man that you are now. And so I just love that whole journey so much for you. And so as you've navigated that, as you've now seen that the healing has happened, but now you're stepping back into the world, what was the next step for you to really become that free version of Thomas in everyday life now?
Yeah. So, there's a person. Here's how I've been able to identify it now at 38, but I was on the journey from 27 to 38. And so there's a person that God intends us to be, and there's a person that we are. I was acting for the longest time the person that I was, that insecure, needed acknowledgement, needing affirmation, needing all the attaboys that I could possibly get. Then there was a person that God was like, hey, this is a person who I need you to be. I need you to be in front of people, and I need you to speak life into people. The circumstances and situations that you went through are not just about you. The circumstances and situations that you went through are about other people. And so my coach in college would always tell me, it's about the betterment. Well, coach, what do you mean it's about the betterment? It's about the betterment of the team. It's about the betterment of your family. It's about the betterment of your community. So even though you've gone through these horrendous situations, whether it was witness of domestic violence, growing up with my mom and having conversations of, you can either pick one movie this month or you can get a shirt. Which one do you want? Or it was going through wanting to quit playing football and my mom telling me, well, if you quit on this, you're going to quit on life. Those situations all were for me to live up to the standard of God, the image that God had placed for me. So over the past couple of years, I've been able to close the gap on the man I want to be and the man that I am, because that was a huge gap for the longest of times. And so at 27 years old, the first thing I needed to do was the acronym that you just gave us, is I needed to heal. Because if you're not healed, you won't become whole. Mm-hmm. And if you're not whole, then it's going to be impossible for you to hold space to heal other people. So for me, I needed to heal those holes in my soul, the holes in the image, the holes in my assumptions, the holes in my perceived reality of who I was, so that now I'm healed, which means that I can hold space for people who are hurting and that want to become whole. And so I don't necessarily need the affirmation from man, because man will never be able to fill my cup the way God can. Yep. And so God took me on the journey of understanding everything. In 2019, me and my dad had an amazing conversation. A friend of mine recommended to me, it's like, Thomas, you need to forgive your father. What you mean? We talk once a week. We're good. No. You need to heal your father. You need to heal that relationship between you and your father. So me and my dad went down to Tampa, Florida, to a TD Jakes conference. And so my dad at the time was a pastor of a church. And so I took him down. We got an Airbnb. We went to the sessions throughout the day, and then we talked all night. And after 3 days of having a very difficult time, I said, my dad finally knows how I feel about him, and I finally know how he feels about me. If something happens, he'll know for the rest of his life. If something happens, I'll know for the rest of my life. And we didn't talk for about 3 months. And we finally talked about 3 months later. And we said, I'm sorry. I said, Dad, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for the way that I treated you, because I was too young to be able to articulate how I felt. I'm sorry, Dad, that I kicked you out of certain situations and experiences in my life. And I'm sorry that I didn't give you the opportunity to explain to me. And he said, Thomas, I'm sorry I wasn't the man that you needed me to be. I'm sorry that I couldn't be there for you the way that you wanted me to show up. He said, but what I can tell you right now is that me as your father, I'm supposed to be your hero, but you're mine. And Justin, when he said that, I'm 2,000 miles away and I just weep. I got that, what I needed as a boy. I got that as a man. And even though I can't go back in time and be a child again and get all of those things, it summed it up. And that again was the reminder of what God said. This is who you are. And some of you can't see me, so I'm pointing lower on the camera screen. And now I'm pointing higher on the camera screen, because God says, this is who I need you to be. Mm-hmm. And in those moments where we get those moments where something fills up our cup, it heals another hole in our soul, then that's what allows us to have the capacity to be able to hold space for the group and the people that we're designed to heal.
So good. I mean, as you told that story, I got goosebumps, and our stories are so similar. I feel like a lot of people who go through sports at an elite level and have fathers in that space, it gets a little fuzzy sometimes, a little hairy. And I've had very similar experiences, especially over the last 3-4 years with my dad. And so as you told that story, just goosebumps everywhere, because I know what that feeling's like, and it's powerful. I wrote down here, I was listening to Tim Ross and Rich Wilkerson the other day down here at VUCon. They had an intimate lunch with them, and they were talking about leadership and this concept of healing. And so often people don't heal the wounds that are present within them. They kind of just say, oh, if I ignore them, they'll go away. But instead what happens is you've got these wounds internally that are just rotting, that are just sitting here rotting and staying inside of you. But on the outside, everything looks great. But little do you know that the moment you start to go lead people, you still lead from that state of the wound. So you're actually bleeding all over everybody that you're trying to lead. And thus you lead out of anger, you lead out of frustration, you lead out of irritation, you lead out of force rather than leading out of love. And what you've just taken us through, I'm sure you notice a different man leading today than even how you led for your championship teams at USC and in the NFL. Kind of talk to the difference or the dichotomy of these two different people.
It's funny you mentioned that, because I just wrote this down of you can't lead if you're leaking.
Yep.
You cannot lead if you're leaking. And what do I mean by that is that all of us have a boat. And so the 8-year-old me had a very small rowboat on a lake. And that boat had 15 holes in it. Now, as I've grown and gotten older, I've become more accomplished, and there's more things. So my boat has gotten bigger. My holes have stayed the same. I'm not leaking as fast, but I'm still leaking, which then is preventing me from leading. And so for us, we got to patch those holes. How do you patch those holes? I remember vividly, I was talking about my friend group to a friend one time who was like a spiritual mentor. And I remember saying to my friend saying, the friends that I'm around, they're not filling me up. Every time I talk to them, I feel depleted. I feel drained. I feel like they're zapping me of the energy. And very quickly, they told me, they said, that's because you're looking to the wrong place to fill your cup. That's when they said, understand your rule. There's a place in everybody's life that you're supposed to fit. They're not supposed to fill your cup. You're called to fill theirs. And so when you're around them, before you go into those interactions, look to your Heavenly Father so he can fill your cup. And instantly, I imagined almost at a wedding in the champagne pyramid.
Champagne pyramid.
And then all of a sudden, God is pouring the champagne. Hey, Jesus, I know he made wine and everything like that. So, I'm not advocating on drinking, but that's just the illustration that I see. And so understanding, Thomas, the rooms that you go into, the people, when you feel as though they're pulling on you, they're draining you, understand they're not supposed to fill your cup. God is.
Yeah.
And so as he fills up your cup, you're just oozing out.
You're pouring on everyone else.
That's exactly it. So don't look for the cups that are below you or next to you even to fill up your cup. Look to your Heavenly Father who's above you. That's going to fill up your cup. And that's what it's going to allow you to ooze and overflow into the cups of others.
It's so good because to be honest, all you need, I mean, you go back into the scriptures, all you need is a drop of oil. That's it. Drop of oil, and it's never going to end as long as you're seeking it from the right source. Yeah. And you're exactly right. We're called not to pull from others, but rather to be poured on top of others to those that are seeking, to those that are lost, to those that are hurt, to those that need healing. Like that's where we're called into. And this journey that you've been on has really allowed you to encapsulate that all together and really start to understand that at a whole new level. And it's really powerful to hear the story of where you've come from and kind of where you've had to move through. When you go and start speaking to people now and speaking on stages and consulting with different teams and companies and these types of things, what is the biggest thing that people latch onto that they're able to take off and kind of be transformed? Because I think a lot of times what ends up happening is we go into a room and there's people presenting, there's people talking, there's so much noise in our society and culture, especially when it comes to leadership and personal development and all of these things. But where do you kind of approach this from so that it hits people in a different way? And when I say different, people have heard this before, but different to me is a sacred word. It's the definition of different means to be set apart. It's the same definition of holy. So different for me is a holy word. It's sacred because every time that somebody wants to look different, feel different, think different, they want a different outcome. They want a different resource. LeBron James is just built different. Oprah just has a different heart. Walt Disney has a different level of creativity. Yeah. It's set apart. Yeah. It allows us to see the new potential. So when you go into a room, you have a different essence about you. You have a different energy about you. You have a different spirit about you. So what is the word and the message and the guidance that you're providing that's just different?
So great picture. When I step into a room, my message is, I'm going to use the illustration of a restaurant. My message is on the menu, right? So the client has booked me for that specific event and my message is on the menu. And so they've picked something on the menu. Now, where my differentiation comes in is I get an opportunity to now whip up a meal that's specifically for the person. And that comes in the way, first and foremost, at the very end of my talk, is I take a pause and I say, what's a commitment that you're going to make and what's a promise that you're going to make to yourself based off of what I just shared over the last 40 minutes? Take that time and pause, because we're getting all this stuff and it's thrown at us and it feels good and it's great. It's like a movie that we just saw that's phenomenal, but we can't remember what the movie was actually about. We can remember how awesome it was. So that's first. Second, I always leave time for Q&A because that's going to be an opportunity where you can speak into the life of something specific. And from there, we all know that one question isn't the only question that's coming from the room. There are several other people. So even though I poured into that person, other people got blessed by the anointing that person. So what happens is that courage of that person who raised their hand, asked that question, I spoke into that. God gave me the word to speak into that. And then from there, other people got healed and whole because of it. And then that's where I noticed that there's a huge transformation. And then you have the people who come up to you afterward and say, hey, I was too embarrassed or ashamed to ask this, but what about this? And then that's kind of how I look at my process of speaking in the tiers as far as impact and empowerment.
So good. You've had 2 books come out before Dig that has really kind of allowed the platform to create Dig. I want to go into some of the concepts that you lean into here. Obviously, our mutual and very good friend John Gordon wrote the foreword for your book, and but I'd love to know a little bit more about like the deeper concepts of and the direction that you go with your new book.
Yeah. So the first book, Permission to Dream, it was about me. And so that's where I was in my life. And so it's a book for middle school and high school.
I don't mean to interrupt, but I'm going to do it anyways. That first book, did you find that to be a big part of your healing process as well?
100%, 100%. Yeah. And Justin, here's where I thank you for asking that question, because one of the biggest things that I learned is that there is perception, there is reality. So I lived with my dad for 1 year when I was 7 years old. And so I was young, but I remembered. And so part of my book is about that process and that time living with my dad. So I called my dad before I wrote the book and I said, hey, Dad, I'm not seeing a thing that we did during that time. But again, I could be wounded. I could be sheltered. I could be jaded. And I said, Dad, tell me about a thing that we did. And he paused, he stopped, and he goes, honestly, we didn't do anything. And I go, wow. So my reality and perception were accurate, but it also gave me a focus of when I become a parent, I want to make sure my kids know there's something Dad did with us. There's something we did as a family. There's something. So there was that. And so it was a very big healing process. The next book that I wrote, The Relentless Pursuit of Greatness, was about college athletes striking while the iron is hot. And the reason why I called it greatness is because it's not the relentless pursuit of the NFL. It's not the relentless pursuit of Major League Baseball. It's not the relentless pursuit of your sport. It's the relentless pursuit of after your sport. Because so many of us go thinking that it's about the sport, but we're going to be a person much longer than we are a player. Yeah. And so we need to focus on that aspect. Nobody picks up the phone and calls us back when I say, hey, my name's Thomas Williams. I haven't played football in 10 years. Can you give me a phone call back? But they will call if I say, hey, Thomas Williams, we got 2 weeks into the national championship, and I just wanted to pick your brain on something. That's the shift in the mindset there. And then we fast forward to just a couple of weeks ago when Dig was released. John actually encouraged me and pushed for me to write this book for a very long time. This book had been in me since the early parts of 2020. And John said to me the very first time I met him, he says, when you write a book about you, there's only a couple people who can gravitate towards it. But when you write a book about a story, everybody can take something from it. And so this is my first parable. This is my first story that's a fable that has to do with diving into your greatness. And it's not about stepping into your greatness and walking into your greatness. It's about there's something inside of you that you're wanting to pursue. And there's 4 points and principles behind the Dig. First and foremost, the principle is you have to identify, is it something pushing you or something preventing you? And so if it's preventing you, you need to quickly shift it into a perspective of pushing you. In 6th grade, my 6th grade teacher told my mom that by the time I was 16 years old, that I would be a leader of a gang, shot, stabbed, and killed. I quickly shifted that into a pushing moment because my mom had tears in her eyes. And she was like, I have this failure that lives in my house. And I'm thinking to myself, I only have 4 years left to live. And so in that moment, I made a promise to myself quietly or loudly to myself and a promise quietly to my mom that I'm going to give you tears of joy. 6 years later, I graduate from high school. I'm 2 years past the mark that he gave me, and I'm earning a full ride scholarship to the University of Southern California, and so on and so forth after that. So I made that promise from prevention to pushing. The next one is, if you don't have the example that something can work, find the proof. See, we don't have the example in our household that dad or mom might have graduated college, that mom or dad was an entrepreneur and owned their own business, or you fill in the blank. But we can find the proof that it exists. Before 1954, everybody in the world thought it was impossible physically to break the 4-minute mile. So what happened is Roger Bannister comes out in the spring of 1954 and runs it in 3 minutes and 59 seconds. In the same year, there was 30 other individuals that broke the 4-minute mile. Now, all of a sudden, did people just get faster, stronger, like their bones just got more dense or better? No, they were exposed to it. They found the proof. Even though there was no example of it happening before, they found the proof that it could be done. And there's a huge, huge advantage once you get exposed to something. The third thing is that there's miracles in the quitting moments. When we listen to the people who we admire, when we listen to the big names of the people in an industry or fields who are the experts, they talk about a moment where they were getting ready to quit, and that's where magic took place and happened. And so I tell people all the time, wait patiently while preparing profusely. So in those moments, you have to prepare profusely because you're going to get an opportunity to come back and do it again. Whether it was quitting before my time as a motivational speaker, as an athlete, there's always a magical moment that happens in the quitting point that I also write about in the book. And fourth and foremost is that you have to run towards the roar. You have to run towards the roar. And where run towards the roar comes about is it's an old African proverb where hyenas or animals are sitting there at the water hole, whether they're bathing, whether they're drinking water. The lions know that they have to eat. So what they do is they put the oldest, most unathletic, can't even run lion on one side of the animals that are at the watering hole. And its only job is to roar as loud as possible. And that's all this lion can do is roar. And it is a frantic roar that will scare anything and anyone. And so naturally, the animals that are at the watering hole run in the complete opposite direction of that loudest roaring lion. But the animals on the other side of that, the lions, they know what they did. So they put the fast, athletic lions that are sitting there on the opposite side, knowing that these hyenas are getting ready to run in the opposite direction. And they're just ready. Claws, mouth are wide open. They're fast. They're ferocious. They're going to eat. So if those animals that would have stayed there and ran towards the roar, they would actually be alive. They would get to the other side of the bushes and they would know that there's just one lion there that can't hurt them, that can't eat them, that can't do anything. But instead they are fearful and they run away from the roar. So in life, we have to run towards the thing that's fearful. Now, I'm not saying that you're supposed to conquer all your fears, because one thing, Justin, I hate roller coasters. I hate them. I don't need to run towards the roar when it comes about roller coasters. But when I get fearful about writing a book, when I get fearful about how to lead a family, when I get fearful about how to start a company, how to start a speaking engagement, this group is going to look at me funny. I need to run towards that roar because that's inside of me. That's my greatness. Everybody who's listening needs to find their greatness so that they can run towards their roar.
I love it. It's so powerful. And it's something that everybody has access to. It's something everyone can relate to and pull into. And so listeners, I really encourage you to go pick up a copy of this. We'll have the area in the show notes that you guys can have immediate links and clicks to it, as well as ways to get a hold of Thomas in a really easy way. And so, Thomas, is something we always ask our guests on this show is, what is one non-negotiable that you have in your life every single day that you engage with?
Motion is the body's lotion. So every single day I need to do something that gets me a sweat, so I can get out of my head and into my body, because in my head is a great place to think, but it's a terrible place for me to live.
I love it. I love it. It's so true. Physiology ultimately changes our psychology, and movement's a good one. I love it all the time. And then number two is, for someone who lives in ownership and somebody who's truly understood what that means in their life, what is your definition of ownership?
Full accountability. Ownership is taking full accountability for what goes right, for what goes wrong, but understanding ultimately it is up to you.
So good. Thomas, this has been such a great episode. I feel like we could go on forever. And I just love your essence and energy. I've talked to you about that already, but you're such a blessing. You've got such a great calling on your life. And I just want to continue to keep encouraging you to step into that, no matter how difficult it is, no matter how uphill it seems, but you're going to be able to speak into so many people and impact so many people in a great way. And I know our audience is going to be able to step into that and just get more access through your book and get more access through you in general. But where can people connect with you outside of just this podcast and your book?
Yeah. So you can find me online at the website, which is thomasrwilliams.com. And you can get the book there. You can find out more information, as well as email me through the website. And then also you can get the book on Amazon. We have hard copies, we have paperbacks, we have the Kindle. And then this is the first time, Justin, where I'm actually going to eat my own dog food and run towards the roar, is I'm going to record an audiobook. So keep an eye out for that, because that will also be to follow.
I love it. And I'll tell you, as soon as you record that, that's going to be a major blessing, because just your voice and the power and authority in which you speak is going to make the book even more impactful. So hopefully that encourages you to step into that.
Thank you.
So listeners, as you go forward, I really encourage you, go grab a copy of his book. I'll have those in the show notes. You have a direct link to his website, but also the direct link to purchase. But when you step in and you're thinking of leading and you're wanting to go somewhere, we know we have to heal first. You have to remove your chain so that you can ultimately live free to engage in the way that you were built, to serve in the way that you were meant to, the way you were designed. Because at the end of the day, it's all about betterment of the team, betterment of the person, betterment of the crew, betterment of the other person around you, betterment of your family. And if you can't heal, you can't be whole. Thus, you can't hold space to heal other people. You have to be able to have the courage to step up, to do that for yourself, so that you can ultimately lead in a powerful way. You can't lead if you're leaking. You have to be able to step up, and it takes the courage of one to serve many, because you're going to be a person for a long time. You're going to be on this earth for a long time. And if you want to move forward powerfully, you have to make sure that your identity is pushing you, not preventing you. You have to make sure that you can ultimately find the example if you don't live with the example. 3, you have to find your magical moment so that you can ultimately find that ability to overcome when you're wanting to quit. And lastly, run towards the roar, run towards what scares you, run towards what holds you back, so that ultimately you can live in that powerful state of ownership. Because ownership is full accountability for what's right or for what's wrong. Because at the end of the day, we know success is different. So own your different. And we'll see you guys next week.